Hey guys, this is Gerry, always reporting for Kids First, and today you're going to be watching my interview with Midge Costin, the director of the brand new documentary Making Waves, The Art of Cinematic Sound. Let's get to the interview. What was your motivation to make it?
Okay, well, I started out as wanting to picture edit when I came out of film school, and then I got into sound because I needed money, and I took a job as a sound editor, and then as I started to work on even that first film, I started to realize how important sound was, and the more I worked in sound, the more I realized how important sound is. It's so emotional. It brings so much to the story, brings so much to the character, and yet people don't even think about it. Like nobody understands what we do. So I always wanted to tell this story, and I just think that it's so important that people understand. Because the other thing is, what I want people to understand is not just how sound it works in film and the artistry of sound, but also how it affects them in their lives. So it's like really understanding it's becoming a good listener, or just sometimes I feel like I'm teaching students to listen, and also that you just realize how important sound is to you. You know. Can I just correct something on the I'm not the head of sound right now since I've started working on the picture, but I was for over 10 years. And then the other thing is my work has been in Academy nominated films for sound, but I was not the supervising sound editor, so it was George Waters and C.C. Hall who yeah.
You know, just want to bounce off something you said. You're talking about how sound affects us in our lives, and I love the opening of your film where Walter Murch, I believe, was talking about how in embryo, the first thing we experience in life is sound of the world outside. Now, was that improvised, or was that actually your idea prior to that?
That comes from an article called "Stretching the Sound to Help the Mind See" that Walter wrote, and it had such an effect on me even when I was already editing, as a sound editor. I knew how important sound was, but I never thought about it that way. And I found that so fascinating. And I have all my students read it every semester. I really always saw the film opening that way. But it was really funny because some people said some people wanted to open it. My producing partners were thinking more about the history of technology and wanted to open it with George Lucas and talking about, the artistry of sound, and that it's like the tools change, but, it's really about the tools. And I really wanted to open this up. So we had the two different openings, and here's something about high school students. It's like they helped make the decision because we sent it out to people to say, what do you like? And my editor sent it to a friend of his that lives in Indiana, and she's a school teacher, and she didn't realize that you can't send the film out to let everybody see it before it's distributed or whatever. And she's a math teacher, and she said she had two different classes. One had 39 students, one had 40 students, and they all looked at it, and it was like 38 to 1 all said this opening. And I was so happy because it was my favorite opening, but I want to credit that class. I should find out who they are and invite them all to the opening of the film.
Well, I think it really made a poetic beginning for the film, and I love how you go through the history of the film. I remember at one point you were talking about the 50s and 60s, how music was almost overpowering sound design at that point. Now, to me personally, it feels like something similar is happening today. Do you have that impression in today's movies?
Well, I think it really depends on the filmmaker, and it's interesting, and I don't want to get myself in trouble by saying there's even some big supervising, multiple Academy Award winning sound designers who work with people on these big films and the directors, and they're really disappointed about how much music gets used. So a lot of times when you're on the mix stage and you've done sound, it will be a kind of tug of war of like, who gets is it this scene for music, or is it a better scene for effects? And I think it depends on the filmmaker. Now, you look at the Coen brothers, some movies they have No Country for Old Men, Carter Burwell, when they saw it together with Skip Leafsay, who's the supervising sound editor, and with the Coen brothers, and Carter Burwell said to Skip, this is yours. And he only has just a couple of tonal moments in the whole film. So, and then Peter Weir, when he was doing I'm not sure which film, if it was, but Master and Commander. That I remember seeing the opening, and it's like you're looking at an aerial of this ship, in the ocean, and it's like, where's the big, orchestrated music? And he doesn't use it. Instead, you're hearing like what's really there, and you feel like what it's like to be on a ship at that time. So I really think, but it depends on the movie that you go to, yeah, and who the filmmaker is and what their choice is, yeah.
You also mentioned some films that really use silence well, in my opinion, like Saving Private Ryan, that opening when the grenade goes off or the explosion goes off and it goes completely silent. It's so poetic. I'm kind of seeing that personally in new films now where they're using silence like Gravity, I thought used silence really well. So do you think that silence is also a powerful component, and do you think that films are using it well today?
Yes, I think that silence is really not silence. It's that there's no noise, so it's not covering things up. So a lot of times silence is it's so quiet you hear the crickets. Also like A Quiet Place, but yeah, and it's so important to have dynamic range. Like you don't want to have just things loud all the time.
So next question I want to ask you is, when you first started, of course, sadly, there were very few women working in the industry. You're one of the first, definitely one of the first. Do you think that's improved over the last couple of decades?
Well, actually, it was just a little before me in the 70s when C.C. Hall, it was Kay Rose, who I have the endowed chair named after Kay Rose, that Steven Spielberg and George Lucas named, which was cool because Kay was the first one to win an Academy Award for sound. But C.C. Hall tells me in the 70s, when she was there, the late 70s, it was only, she could only see Kay and Kay's daughter Vicky Sampson, who I've worked with. She's the one who edited Ordinary People, who talks about taking out all the painstaking work they did. But there really weren't very many women then. But when I came up, there were more women, but there aren't any more than there were when I was there. So that's the thing, is like, I don't know. There weren't very many women editing effects. There are more women who edit dialogue, and I think it's because it's seen as kind of you need a lot of patience, and it's, you don't get as much recognition for it, and you don't end up being super. Oh well, now they co-supervise, but it used to be the effects editor was the one who supervised the show. So yeah, I think that it could be. I mean, we have a lot of women. I show a lot of women because I knew them in the industry, or they're just well known. But it's still, yeah, it's still not great. It's so. But let me say something about that. I used to think it was nefarious when I looked at numbers, like, oh, the guys are keeping the women out. You know what it is I just think it's like if you don't think about, oh, I can't have everybody like myself who looks and sounds like me, or that I might feel comfortable with. You have to stretch and say it's better when there's a balance. Like I loved working on crews that were kind of 50-50. And because men bring a certain thing, women, and there are stereotypes, and then there are people who don't fit the stereotypes at all. And I think it's just so important to have like a mix of all different types of people, because it just makes for a healthier environment, honestly. Yeah.
I could fully agree with that, and I really respect that. And another question I want to ask is, for people who are going to the industry now, women, men, anybody who want to go into set or go into any post-production room, what tips would you give them, to get into the industry, to get good at that craft?
Yeah. Honestly, this is what I think, that there's a lot of talented people. So the people who stay and who work are the ones who really are willing to do what it takes for the job, are willing to show up early, stay the amount of time they need to, and also help other people out. So it's like, I always say this to my students, who do you want to work with? Like someone who's, brilliant, but just doing their own work and doesn't communicate well or whatever, or the person who is going to be kind of fun to be with and also helps you out. And so, because there's a lot of people who are talented, and the thing I think that you've got to kind of be humble and just do whatever, make the connections, and then people will want to help you and bring you up. And so it's more about starting out. Even if you're a runner, you do your job the best you can. You show up on time. You do what you say you're going to do. You make your deadlines. All that stuff. That's so important. And then, be a nice person to be around. I mean, if that's hard for you, then you should go into some other line of work, because filmmaking is so collaborative, that you're always going to be working with other people. And who do you want to be with? I would say also work on, like I say with my students, work on as many other student films. You just want to get the experience. And it doesn't matter. Like I work the same if I work on a feature film or even student film giving advice or suggestions, it's like I take it seriously. Even if the script isn't good, I'm like trying to do the best job I can. If you do the best job you can, you show up like with a good attitude. And if you're a problem solver and not like a complainer or whatever, when we all complain with each other, at some point, but you just want to have that I can do attitude and and really just go for do your best work no matter what. A friend of mine who worked on both said she does the same work whether it's Amadeus or Ernie Goes to Camp or whatever that name is. She worked on both movies and she said she did the same work. She approached it like, I want to do my best here. I'm going to make it better.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that. Even, the silly comedies and the big dramas, they're both establishing worlds. They both have cinematography and costume design and everything trying to establish those worlds. And, speaking of world, when you look at cinematography and costume design, you definitely see a lot of differences between where you go in the world. Japan, their cinema is very different from an American cinema. Do you think the same kind of difference exists in sounds? Like, do you think American sound design differs from Japanese or Italian or anywhere else?
I think because it's a different sensibility it really depends on the style of the movie. But, we set out to actually, we were thinking about making this international, and then we did so much just in California alone that we just had to make it, and it's very California-centric. But there was a lot of history here, too. But that's what I would love to study even more. But it really depends on the style of the film. Like, I love Kurosawa. But Kurosawa almost has a similar thing to like Hitchcock, because they're very quiet kind of films and they just work with plot and they're very thought out before, and so I think it almost depends on the filmmaker. But I think also I have a student from India this semester, and we were just talking about the differences because their sensibility is they do all ADR, and I mean it looks good, so the automated dialogue replacement, so the guide track, when they like in American films, you try to get the best track that you can, the best performance on the set. But in India, it's almost like just a guide track, and then they come in, and in the studio after, they do the best, then that's when they really pour on that performance. And so that's just a whole different thing. To me, I can feel the difference in the films, but that's just the sensibility that they have. And, and so it's like, it's just different. But I would like to study that more because, in the last few years, like when I was growing up and watching films in the 70s and 80s, we had got a lot more foreign films. I just don't think we see enough foreign films.
This is Gerry Orr supporting for Kids First. Bye.
Makes these moments eternal.